My patrons ask me questions and I answer them, so let's get into this. So Rhino asks, what do you think sets a good Magic player apart from a great one? So I think there are 3 components to this. 2 of them that are going to apply to just a really broad range of things, and one of them that's going to be very specific to Magic. So let's talk about the 2 that's going to apply to getting good at anything. And the first thing is playing. You have to play a lot. You have to practice. If you're ever going to get good at anything, you have to just put in the hours. There's no other way to do it. You're not going to be great at basketball unless you are practicing throwing the ball into the hoop. You're not going to get good at chess if you just play like once in a while. So for Magic, as you see with a lot of the top players, they're jamming games constantly while they're learning the game. I think you might hear some of them say, well, I don't play so much Magic these days, but they can afford to do that because they've already put in the hours to get to the point to where they are, and playing anymore doesn't put them that much higher than where they already stand. So you have to practice like non-stop. In fact, I think I got good at almost most of my games because I basically abandoned other hobbies for the current hobby that I'm in. So when I was interested in chess, I wasn't playing anything else except chess. I was just chess, chess, chess. And then when I got interested in poker, I pushed the chess away, and then I was just fully absorbed into poker, lived, breathed, and ate poker. And then the same thing is with Magic. Now that I am deeply embedded in Magic, I don't play the other games nearly as seriously or nearly as often. It is just mostly Magic. And my rise to really learning the game was just playing, like, I think I went to F&M, like, well, not F&M, but like I went to local events 3 times a week, 3 or 4 times a week, and I was also jamming tons online. So I was super obsessed and absorbed into the game. And I would say the good Magic players, they play once in a while, but do you know what? You really need to play often, and that's why I really like Magic the Gathering Online, and I recommend Magic the Gathering Online to people so you can jam those games. You can play a lot and to accumulate experience. So the second part that will separate the great Magic players from the good ones is that they're learning the game, and they're also learning the game at a high level, and perhaps from authorities on the game. So in games like, you know, when I was learning chess and poker, I was trying to learn from players way better than me, and I also tried to either learn from them or become friends with them. You want to be friends with players better than yourself, because you're going to absorb through strategy and talking back and forth how by doing methods like that, you're going to become a better player. If you're talking Magic with somebody much better than you, they're going to find the flaws in your strategy, in your way of thinking, in your mentality, in your philosophical view of the game, and they're going to set you in the right direction. So there's also a saying that says you are the average of the 5 people around you the most. So if you are spending most of your time with like casual commander players or like, I don't know, brewers for standard, I mean, you're going to end up with that sort of quality of skill in the end. Whereas if you're going to surround yourself with people who win tournaments, people who want to go to the Pro Tour, people who are trying to go on the Pro Tour, people who are trying to win online and try to figure out the next best deck that's going to beat Standard, that's going to be modern, then those are the people that are going to help you grow much faster. So that's one thing you could do in Magic. In other ways, you also want to learn from people who write articles that are very good at the game. So there's a lot of people that write articles, but I would put much more weight on the people like Paulo Vitor Damarosa and Luis Scott Vargas and Sam Black and Owen Turtenwald. I mean, Owen Turtenwald every so often is retweeting that someone won a tournament or got second place with his list, with his sideboard guide. So, you know, that's because those people know more than anybody else in this game, so you can absorb much more from those players than you can from basically anybody else. And I want to combine that it's not enough to be jamming games. So we got I told you about part 1 is you want to play a lot, you need to get a lot of practice, and now part 2 is you want to learn, you want to be learning and growing. And I want to say that it is definitely not enough to be just jamming games in Magic, because you need practice. Also must be done intelligently. Just random practice is not good enough. You need smart practice. That was like a component that was missing from this saying that all geniuses have 10,000 hours of practice. Well, do you know what? I've seen people put in 10,000 hours of crap and go nowhere because they didn't do it intelligently. So the real saying, the correct saying should be, you need to put into 10,000 hours of smart practice. So in combination of learning how to play the game and play it better, you then need to apply your new knowledge to your practice. If you're just jamming games by itself, that's not good enough. Now let's go on to the third component that's very specific to Magic. And there are going to be exceptions to this rule. I would be one, but you basically want to play tier 1 decks. That's why pros are always playing tier 1 decks. The majority, they're not going to go for metagame decks. They like to play tier 1 decks. And there's a lot of reasons for that, because statistically, they have free wins. There are certain hands where no matter what your opponent has, you're going to win the game. So tier 1 decks have a lot of free wins attached to them. The second one is that tier 1 decks are usually very powerful. They're pushing the issue. They're forcing you to curve out. They're forcing you to draw that land or that creature immediately, because if you don't, you're going to get run over. You're playing against a powerful tier 1 deck. Another thing about tier 1 decks is that they're very forgiving. Usually if you make mistakes, there's bombs after bombs in the deck that can help you catch up into the game. Like how hard is it to like rip Hazaret off the top of your deck, or in the case of Modern, like rip Supreme Verdict or something. There are game-ending cards that either bring you back to parity or put you way ahead, and those are a lot of the features of the tier 1 decks. Now, there are exceptions to this rule. For example, I could be considered an exception. Merfolk doesn't have a lot of the aspect of most tier 1 decks, and it requires a lot of experience, but there are advantages to it that if you can leverage, like experience and customizability, to help you win events as well. There is something about being under the radar, but you would have to be very, very smart. And it's very hard to play a deck that's under the radar, because how did you practice and tune it to get so good without it like being released on the internet? How did you tune this against the best competition without the deck being leaked? So it's very hard to be under the radar. But there are some exceptions. Like, for example, Tom Ross is actually responsible for winning with a lot of fringe decks just because he tuned them properly. Like, for people don't remember, but Infect was actually super fringe. It was like a tier 3 deck. It was a complete joke. Even I know even Birthing Pod was around and Malera was not good for the deck, but like it wasn't until Tom Ross says, do you know what, this is how Infect should be built. It was built completely wrong all along, so this is how it should really be built, and now it's going to be really strong. And it was tier 1 and for a very long time, until the banning of Gitaxian Probe. And Tom Ross was also responsible for reviving 8-Rack. 8-Rack was basically sort of a clunky deck that played Ensnaring Bridge, and he said, you know what, let's get rid of the bridge, make it look a lot more like Jund, and this deck is great, and he's top 8'd a few SCG Opens with that. So there are definitely exceptions to the tier 1 rule, but on the grand scale of things, the pros, the great players, they're playing the tier 1 decks. They don't want to hedge, they don't want to put too much time into this other stuff. It's not for them. They can't waste too much time. They have to learn Draft and a bunch of other formats, so they may not want to specialize in, or take the opportunity to learn from a very fringe deck. So that's one thing that separates a lot of great players from mediocre players, or even good players. They stick to tier 1 decks. This is super important. It's less important in Modern, Although, you know, a lot of pros will still say, you know, you should still play something tier 1. But it's really important in standard. It's really important. The power level of certain cards just make anything else basically unplayable. And if you expect to win like a GP, you usually should be playing one of the big Titan tier 1 decks of the format. Unless, I don't know, unless you're Brad Nelson, you really know something that no one else does. So I hope that answered your question, Rhino. Thank you very much. So next we've got Edward S. Since I missed last month, I will ask a question and a half. You seem inclined to play patiently, so is there a more control-focused build of Merfolk that you have on the back burner? And I would say overall I don't. I really love to be playing a patient game of Merfolk if I can, but right now I think for the last many months, ever since humans were out, that we don't have a lot of room to be playing patiently. I mean, we do want to have the patient elements to be able to beat Blue-White Control, which has been very popular for a long time now, but we need to set the deck up so that we can be very proactive whenever we're facing humans, whenever we're facing spirits, or if we're ever facing something like KCI, Car Clan Ironworks, because we need to put a clock on the board. So I don't have anything. I'm actually looking at ways of making the deck even more aggressive. I want to jam Mirror Rejury in there. But yeah, it doesn't look like it's the right metagame for something more control-based, although I will still play creature-based versions of Merfolk as patiently as I possibly can. And the second half of Edward's question is, will you play any Legacy or Vintage again? Can you be incentivized to play some? Also, I recall a paper game video plan. Is Fusion still available to set you up? So the first half of this is that, like, actually the Vintage videos did pretty well. I don't know, I guess there's a very large Vintage community that wants to watch Vintage. I look at my old Vintage videos and they actually have a lot of views and they're still gaining views. I guess because there's very little Vintage YouTube content. But overall, like, the Legacy content is just less popular than the modern content. Also, Legacy is not really moving a whole lot. Like, it's the same format over and over again. Not many big shakeups. So therefore, Legacy gets pushed down. I mean, I played Legacy not too long ago, but Legacy is just going to show up less frequently than Modern, because Modern is changing a lot and people need that Modern content. And it's also the most popular content on the channel. And I have already played some paper matches. If you want, you can check out just look up Magic with a Chess Clock. I played some paper Magic with Andrew Day2 Dryden, and hopefully somewhere in the future we could play more. I played it at Fusion, but unfortunately and I wanted to use their streaming equipment, but unfortunately their microphone is broken, so I could not use their stuff. I had to use my camera from my phone. But I do plan on having some more paper content in the future, because I don't think it's too hard that when I go to a paper event that I could just take a little tripod with me and then away we go. We get some paper Merfolk content on this channel. It won't happen. I don't think it'll happen too close to the far future, because I'm studying right now. School is very busy, but I have already done some, and I plan to do some more in the future, so thanks for asking. So anyway, thank you very much to all my patrons who very patiently waited for this to come out. My school was very busy at the time that I requested questions for the Ask Me Anything, and they definitely deserve it. You patrons are the world to me. Thank you very much for supporting the channel, and now that I've been able to catch up with my work, I can start bringing out the rewards again. And I hope everyone else liked the questions. These were very, very good questions. So anyway, this has been Nikachu answering the questions to his Patreon Ask Me Anything.